So our thoughts and prayers are very much with you at this time. As Terry just emphasized, Algoma builds what Canada needs right now, what Canada needs for the future: steel. We need steel to build our rails and our transportation lines, to build out our energy infrastructure. We need steel to build our autos, steel to build our ships. We need high quality, Canadian-made steel to build greater prosperity. And how you build it, how you build that steel also is what Canada needs right now. With ambition, with innovation, a willingness to work hard and work smart. You know, we are literally weeks away from the first test run of the electric arc furnace line, which is going to take 70% of the carbon out, a huge investment that's been made alongside the Government of Canada, the Government of Ontario. This is how we build Canada strong. Now, we know, and Terry just mentioned it, people at Algoma, the people of the Sioux, people across Canada, we're living through the biggest crisis of our lifetimes. And just yesterday, President Trump repeated his attacks on Canada. And I'll paraphrase. He said Canada should not play any part in the American auto industry, when we play a central part in the American auto industry. He has put, for the second time, illegal and unjustified tariffs on aluminum and on steel. So he's threatening Canadian workers in auto manufacturing and workers throughout the industry's supply chain, including here at Algoma. So let me be equally clear. This is Canada. We decide what we do here. The President's latest comments are more proof, as if we needed any, that the old relationship with the United States that we've had is over. And it's proof, and it's a reminder, it's a call to action that we need to chart a new path. That's the new reality. Le Président Trump menace le Canada.
President Trump is threatening Canada, the most reliable and true partner of the United States. He is threatening our businesses. He is threatening our workers. He is threatening the savings of our retirees.
President Trump, his words and actions, he wants to divide us, because dividing us would make his job easier. He's trying to break us so that America can own us. And that will never happen. We will stand with the auto workers, with the forestry workers, the aluminum workers, and above all, the steel workers. We will stand with every single Canadian worker targeted by President Trump's attacks on our country. We will stand with you. And crucially, we will fight, protect, and build. We have implemented our own counter tariffs, which will cause maximum damage in the U.S. and have only minimal impact here. On steel and aluminum, our tariffs match fully the scale of the U.S. assault. And we are returning all of the proceeds, every dollar, from those tariffs to protect our workers and the businesses that are most affected by this trade war. Anticipating this crisis and the severity of the crisis from day one, my government has helped Canadian businesses weather the storm. We're providing companies with the option of up to $40 billion in liquidity or direct financing, including by deferring tax payments. This will allow those companies to take longer-term decisions without undue pressures from short-term trade actions. A few weeks ago, in Windsor, we pledged to create a $2 billion strategic response fund that will fortify the entire Canadian auto supply chain, from finished vehicles to steel. We launched a Made in Canada strategy to address a Made in America problem. We're developing new markets with reliable partners. We have never taken our eye off the ball. We're also using all levers available, everything that's available to the government to support our steel industry. We will maximize Canadian steel, aluminum, and other critical minerals from exploration through to battery production. We'll maximize the use of those materials to seize this economic opportunity, to create higher paying jobs, and ultimately to build the strongest economy in the G7. We will now deploy a Made in Canada procurement strategy that will prioritize Canadian steel, Canadian aluminum, and Canadian critical minerals. We will create Buy Canadian standards for federal infrastructure funding and for national defense projects to maximize our use of Canadian steel. This, as we boost Canadian domestic defense industries, and I stress domestic defense industries in production, as we build security relationships with our most reliable partners, including in Europe.
And that includes Canada's participation in the Rearm Europe plan to support transatlantic security while at the same time generating investments here in Canada. We will use all the tools at our disposal by leveraging technological advancements and other innovations to build homes at a pace that has not been seen since Second World War.
In our strategy to double home building, we'll invest in our homegrown building industry, supporting workers and businesses and driving the adoption of Canadian mass timber, modular, prefabricated technologies. This too will benefit our key industries, including steel. We will unite our country and invest in nation-building infrastructure on a scale not seen in generations. This means major nation-building projects, ports, rails, bridges, tunnels, and much more. Projects that will connect Canada and grow our economy in ways that last for generations. Again, benefiting key industries, including steel. And in this process, we will safeguard our economy and our values.
We are working in partnership with the provinces, the territories, and Indigenous communities to accelerate the completion of major projects. We will build these projects of national interest at an unprecedented speed, using steel and aluminum from here, critical minerals from Canada, and Canadian workers and Canadian businesses. We will double the number of housing units that we build every year by relying on the expertise of our workers and businesses and using Canadian lumber. We will build a single Canadian economy, not 13. Build a strong Canadian economy. Build Canada strong. We will put ourselves in a position of strength to negotiate or renegotiate trade agreements.
We can control our economic destiny with the right plan. A plan that uses overwhelming force to overcome the anxieties that people naturally feel, to break through the fog of uncertainty that businesses face, and above all, to replace what the crisis is taking away. As the private sector retreats, government needs to step up to provide direction, to catalyze action and investment. And that's what our plan to build Canada strong will do. Pierre Poilievre has no plan to stand up to President Trump. He's literally grasping at straws as Canada faces the gravest crisis of our lifetimes. He's pledging to end childcare, dental care, farmer care, the CBC. He's ignoring the investments we need to build the strongest economy that works for everyone. He's offering Canadians instead a fantasy of fiscal tricks and phantom growth. In contrast, we will catalyze up to $500 billion in investment and create a total of up to $20,000 in economic value for every Canadian over the next 5 years. Because unlike Pierre Poilievre, I've managed budgets before. I've managed economies before. I've managed crises before. This is a time for experience, not experiments. And as I have been clear from the start, America wants our land, our resources, our water, our country, and we will fight them. Because we know that in a crisis, you have to prepare for the worst, not hope for the best. You must build forward, not cut back. In a crisis, you need bold action, not tired ideology. And above all, in a crisis, we need to bring people together, not pull them apart. Le choix devant nous ne pourrait pas
The
être
choice we face now could not be clearer.
face à cette crise.
In the face of this crisis, will we bend to the will of the Americans, or will we stand up for ourselves? Will we cut what we need, or invest in our future?
I know how we can give each other far more than any Americans can take away. And I know how, as America retreats from the world, Canada can lead it. So this Monday, Canadians will choose who stands up for them as their Prime Minister. And I'm asking for your vote for positive reasons, regardless of which party you voted for in the past. I'm asking for your vote to stand up to Donald Trump, to build a united Canada, to build Canada strong. Thank you, merci, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Prime Minister. And I'll start with the media delegation for questions. Toronto Star.
Alex Ballingo with the Toronto Star. You talk about making big polluters pay for the adoption of green technologies to make up for the lost emission cuts from getting rid of the consumer carbon price.
Yes.
But your platform makes it sound like that might be optional for companies. So can you explain to us how that's going to work?
Yeah.
Why you think that we should be doing this now when companies like this are struggling so much with the trade war and with the tariffs?
Well, so there's a couple of things. And we're in Algoma, so it's a great question because we have three aspects of our climate plan that are relevant here. One is there is an industrial carbon price, but the question is what happens with the proceeds from that carbon price and to what extent is it reinvested in the industry? And we're literally about to see the reality of that as the electric arc line comes on and the 70% reduction in carbon that comes from that through SIF investments, partnerships, Canada Infrastructure partnerships with the province of Ontario, and of course the drive of the workers and innovation here at Algoma. So that's an example. That's one example. The second example, which is something we've also committed to, Alex, which is as our businesses, as our big industry decarbonize, we don't want foreign steel coming here that's high carbon, right? From Asia, from America. So we will have a carbon border adjustment mechanism that prevents that from happening and puts them in a stronger position. So that's the second. And then the third aspect is we have this carbon market that's in place. And we have an opportunity so that the large polluters on the marginal reductions that they make, that they can pay for people's climate smart choices. It will end up being a more efficient market for them. The government will stand in the middle and make sure that people have clear incentives. And if we are elected, we will put this in place for home retrofits, for better heating systems, for EVs. And then in that way, the two markets come together. It's better for the country. It's much more efficient, and it will lead to higher and faster reductions. A little closer, please.
Oh, sorry, just to be clear, if I understand what you're saying, will that system impose a new cost on companies like this, and how will that work?
No, in fact, Alex, thank you for the clarifying. it will actually reduce their costs in the end because it'll give them more options on what they can do to reduce. Yeah.
Next question.
Okay. Plus près et plus loin.
Check, 1, 2.
Merci.
Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Pour revenir sur votre
Hello, just to
conversation
come back to your conversation with Mr. Trump on March 28th, yesterday you defended yourself for lacking transparency. But when Mr. Trump talked about the 51st state, can you tell Canadians exactly what he said to you at that point? Well, first of all, what is important on a call, any call, or any discussion with a chief of state like President Trump is the content of the conversation. It's not right to provide all the details of such a conversation, in my opinion. What is important is to talk about the result, and the result was respect for Canada as a sovereign country, and second, an agreement to engage in comprehensive negotiations regarding our trading and security relationship, and negotiations that would begin right after the election. And I advised him as well that we would introduce counter tariffs on the auto sector. In that context, what is important is who will be the Prime Minister after this election and who can stand up to him and build a strong Canada.
Look, to the context, what's most important in a discussion, a meeting, is the conclusions of the meeting. The conclusions of this discussion with the President were clear, that he respected Canada as a sovereign country, that we will meet as two sovereign nations, the Prime Minister and the President, after Monday's election, to have comprehensive discussions about the economic and security partnership. I advised him that we would be retaliating against any auto tariffs, which we did. And I also advised him, I didn't say this in French, but that I would be working hard to gain Canadians' trust. And that leads me to the final point that I said in French, that this election is crucial because Canadians are deciding on Monday, and the people of Sault Ste. Marie in Northern Ontario could be decisive in this, who is going to be Prime Minister, who will be facing the President in those negotiations, which will start in very short term, which will have huge ramifications for this industry, the steel industry that we're in, and Canadians across this country. I'm working hard to earn their trust. Thank you.
Question.
Good morning, Mr. Carney.
Good morning.
This is Promit Mukherjee from Reuters. In 2022, the Liberal Party imposed the luxury tax, which impacted the sale of Bombardier jets and the aviation and the aerospace industry, and a lot of high-value production as well. Since you are trying to promote high-value production, Canadian manufacturing, steel, aluminium, is that something that the Liberal Party or you as the Prime Minister will look at revoking or removing?
It's an interesting question. I'm going to give you a straight answer. It's not something I've looked directly at. Where we have concentrated our efforts is where will we have the maximum impact? Maximum impact. So let me give you an example to that. Some of you sat through what maybe was the least interesting speech that I've given, and I know there's competition for that, but which was about defense procurement and the change to our defense procurement mechanism so we can be much faster and we can be much more Canadian in our defense procurement. Because we are literally going to be spending over $100 billion in defense procurement over the course of the next 5 years. And almost all of that money has been going south of the border. We want much more of it to go north of the border, including back up into Canadian steel. So you see the opportunities. So where we've focused is where we can have a maximum impact. And the question you ask is, yes, right on the margin, but in the grand scheme of things is not, if I may say, that important, and so I haven't looked at it. We haven't looked at it yet. Thank you.
Prochaine question.
Bonjour, Monsieur Carney,
Hello,
Bonjour.
Mr. Carney. I have two questions. If after the election you end up with a minority government, would you agree to reach an agreement with the Bloc Québécois? And on the broader question of Quebec's independence, the Parti Québécois leader would like to hold a referendum on independence in his first mandate. What do you think of the idea of holding a referendum in the context of the Canadian-American dispute? At this point in time, I am working very hard to win every vote from every Canadian. I want to win those votes and receive a strong and clear mandate for negotiations with the United States. And our economic strategy, our comprehensive economic strategy, is to build a strong Canada. So it's difficult to speculate about future events in Quebec or Quebec policies over the next few years. I can say that I will defend Quebec's culture, the French language, supply management, and more than that, my government, if we are elected, if we win the election, my government will not only protect but reinforce and promote Quebec society and Quebec's economy. Yes, if you don't mind, in terms of the principle of independence, you navigated Brexit. You've seen there's tension in Scotland, which wants to separate. Just on the principle. Well, that bill does not exist at this time. No, I know, but that's pure speculation. We are dealing with a specific situation, a real crisis, and we have to resolve that crisis right now. That is the issue in this election, in my opinion.
Good morning, Bill Curry from the Globe and Mail. On the issue of ethics and transparency, Canada's ethics laws have been widely criticized as inadequate, particularly as a check on the Prime Minister's office and his powers. On access to information, the system is bogged down, excessive redactions, it's viewed as not working. Yet your platform is essentially silent on those two issues. So what commitments are you prepared to make to improve Canada's ethics regime and access to information system?
I think, Bill, you ask an important question. Yes, it's not in the platform. It's in my head. And so I will now, against the advice of my advisors, let it out of my head, which is I do think looking at access to information is quite important. The speed with which the information is provided, and as you say, the redactions that I think, I'm happy to commit to having a review of that, because I do find that, at least as an outsider, I've been an outsider until now, and as a consumer of it, that I sometimes can't always follow the process, if you will. So an objective review of that would serve Canadians well, regardless of the result of the election. Thank you.
Ethics?
Look, I think there have been a number of reinforcements over the course of the last decade on the ethics side. I think that I would distinguish between the rules and the conduct. If there are specific proposals, obviously we would look at them. But what's important is bringing that spirit of obviously the highest integrity. I think my track record is consistent with that, but also that commitment that goes with it to transparency, which was the second part of your question. Thank you.
Next question.
Glenn McGregor, City News. Also not on your platform was electoral reform.
Yeah.
Your predecessor, Justin Trudeau, when he was first elected, promised to end the first past the post system, have a more representative system.
Yeah.
Will you make the same commitment? If you were elected Prime Minister, will you revisit changing the current electoral system?
I think we didn't have it in our platform. Government's about making priorities, and given the scale of the economic crisis that we're facing, the security crisis we're facing, our commitment to supporting Canadians through a range of social programs and recommitting there, that candidly is not. Yes, it is not in the platform. I will give you my personal view on it, which is that I think as a Prime Minister should be neutral on these issues, so that if a process is developed, that they are objective and not being seen to tip the scales in one direction or another. And I think that, if I may, looking back on what happened previously, that probably is part of what stalled progress on it. So there may be a point, Glenn, where we've advanced on other immediate pressing priorities, particularly the crisis. That's our intention, that those more structural issues in our democracy could be addressed. Thank you. En français, en ce qui concerne ça, c'est assez court. Oui, on doit choisir.
Yes, as a government, one has to choose one's priorities, and our priority now is to resolve the crisis and build a stronger economy in Canada and strengthen Canada's security. That's my first point. And second, in my opinion, it's better for the Prime Minister, any Prime Minister, to be neutral when it comes to potential improvements to our democratic system after resolving the crisis. We'll begin with that, but I am open to those questions, but in my opinion, this is not the time to be engaging in that process.
Question from the media.
Hello, Mr. Carney. Le devoir to come back to Mr. Trump's comments. Your response is always to say it will never happen, we will never be the 51st state. But that doesn't seem to be convincing Mr. Trump. He's continuing to make those comments. So it's fine to say we can't change the president, but it's quite clear. But it's quite clear that you may need to change your strategy. Do you intend to harden the tone with Mr. Trump? Well, I have always said the same thing. No, it'll never happen. As an individual, President Trump has some obsessive ideas. And that is one. But it's important to understand that we need to be crystal clear with him. A few weeks ago, Mr. Blanchet was saying it's a joke. It's a joke. But it's not a joke. It's his very strong desire to make this happen. And that's one of the reasons why this crisis is so serious. So we need a strategy, and the start of any strategy is to build a strong country. But he respects strong economies.
We'll now take two questions from local media.
Greg McGrath, Gaudy, Sioux Today. As you mentioned during your remarks, Algoma Steel's working to bring the electric arc furnace online in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, there's a looming trade war with the United States and the industrial carbon tax in place. I'm wondering if in your plans to support Canadian industries, you would consider exempting companies from the industrial carbon tax, particularly like ones like Algoma Steel, which are actively working towards having greener technologies in place in the near future?
So what's happening is that there's a couple things here. One is that there's a value to that industrial carbon tax and the predictability of that tax and the certainty around. It encourages the types of investments that help companies such as Algoma leapfrog their competitors, and leapfrog in many cases they're American competitors but international competitors. And Algoma is on the cusp of realizing the benefits of these investments as the EAF comes online. They have low carbon production, and we're going to reinforce those benefits, including with our trade strategy, to make sure that's the case as well. We will continue, and I'm here with Terry and making this this commitment, which we've said publicly, but just to physically demonstrate it, if you will, which is to take all the revenues from our tariffs, and we have counter tariffs on steel and aluminum against $30 billion, and reinvest them in the workers and the companies that are most affected. And that will include in continuing to improve the competitiveness of these companies. Thank you.
Last question.
Morning, Mr. Prime Minister. Corey Nordstrom, CTV News, Northern Ontario. You have said every dollar collected from Canada's reciprocal tariffs will go to protecting Canada's workers and the businesses most affected by the crisis. How will you determine which businesses are impacted, especially for the many businesses that simply rely upon spending from workers like those in Electoral?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So what we're looking at is, as you can appreciate, so we're in ground zero in many respects of businesses and workers affected by the tariffs. Then you move out along the supply chain. Then ultimately, as you say, you move, or I think you imply, you move to the general economy, the spending at retail or travel or stores or clothes or whatever. It's principally going to go to those industries at the core and one or two steps removed along the supply chain. But then the advantage of that is you get the, to talk like an economist for a second, the multiplier effect of that support that goes there. What we won't do is pocket the money. And if you look at the Conservative platform, they take the $20 billion of tariff revenue, doesn't go to the workers, doesn't go to the companies, it goes in to the pockets for a tax cut that shows up in 5 years. That's not leadership. That's not going to build Canada strong. We have a totally different approach. Thank you very much. Merci.
Thank you. This is what concludes today's press conference.
Great. Thank you, sir.
We have been listening in to Liberal Party leader Mark Carney as he's speaking in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. Hello and welcome inside the CBC newsroom. I'm Arti Pole. Of course, we are less than 72 hours now from polls opening across this country, and we know that the leaders are making their final pitches to Canadians across the country, fanning out in different ridings, trying to see where they can make an impact. Of course, one of the top priorities for the Liberal Party leader, one of his main focuses, has been taking on Trump. Tariffs and the threats to sovereignty. We heard much of that here when he was speaking at a steel plant in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. We are also standing by to listen in for the NDP Leader Jagmeet Singh. He is set to speak this hour. With this, let's bring in now the CBC's Janice McGregor. She's been watching this all for us from Ottawa. Okay, first let's start with what we heard from the Liberal Party leader.
Yeah, and this is sort of a repackaging, a rejigging of a lot of Mark Carney's standard stump speech, but specifically with this kind of Sault Ste. Marie steelworker audience in mind. Why go to the Soo at this point in the campaign? Well, this has been a seat where we have seen a lot of three-way competition with sort of Labour leaders kind of split between New Democrats, but also rank and file union members, very receptive to the Conservative message. Pierre Poilievre had a big rally in the Soo a couple of weeks ago, but it's currently held by a Liberal incumbent. You saw him over Mark Carney's shoulder there, Terry Sheehan, a big champion of the steel industry, has been front and center when the previous Trudeau government made big investments to help upgrade the facility, Algoma Steel, that they're at today to help it. And you heard Mark Carney talk about the investments that have helped it switch over to a much greener, cleaner newer form of steelmaking. You heard him referring to them almost being online with their new kind of furnace technology to sort of replace something that, over that replacement apparently cuts the emissions at this plant by some 70%. The steel industry, obviously, a very heavy emissions type industry. So a very big green move, a good story, really, on the environment front happening in the Soo. And Carney there in part to sort of take credit for that, but also to talk about the story in Sault Ste. Marie in terms of the fight with the Americans on steel. And he being the leader that wants to champion Canada's industry in the coming battle with Donald Trump, which especially if you're talking about defense industries, if you're talking about adjusting things at the border to keep out foreign steel that is dirty and polluting, you need to be kind of emphasizing those points. The steel tariffs, one of the first probably that Canada wants lifted in this fight, one that sort of may not wait for a renegotiation of NAFTA, might have to be dealt with earlier in this economic and security partnership negotiation that Mark Carney has been talking about starting with Donald Trump as early as next week. But he can't be presumptuous about the vote on Monday and the need to re-elect people like Terry Sheehan first. Just in terms of the questions and answers, I'll just also note that sometimes on the campaign trail, we do see Francophone journalists in a completely different place than their Anglophone colleagues. I think today was one of those days for this availability. You heard the Francophone journalists still back talking about that kind of 51st state stuff on the call between Carney and Donald Trump. That is very much a live, hot issue for Quebec voters right now. The Bloc Québécois leaning hard into that. Blanchet saw his fortunes kind of rise a bit when the sort of Trump stuff faded a bit from the headlines. Quebec voters kind of more open to going home to the Bloc and desperately wanting to keep that trajectory, not lose it again now that Donald Trump is back in the headlines saying menacing things about Canada. And the Francophone journalists kind of pushing Mark Carney accordingly, sort of trying to sort of see what else they can glean from this situation, which I found interesting. Meanwhile, the questions on the English side were kind of all over the map. Questions about things missing from the platform on ethics, on electoral reform, trying to sort of prompt him to go beyond kind of what he's talked about in the campaign to date. Luxury taxes, what are you going to do about that? We sort of have had a very narrow focus from the Liberal leader. He has been very much about the Canada-US stuff. And you saw him even when people were like, well, what about this? Wouldn't you want to do this? And he's like, well, we have to deal with the crisis first. We have to deal with the crisis first. Engaged in the environmental questions to a certain extent, but those two trade questions, when you hear him talking about border adjustment mechanisms, that's jargon for basically putting up a tariff wall to make sure that steel that's made that is with a lot of heavy emissions doesn't come in there and ruin things for places like Algoma Steel, which have had the government help from both federal and provincial governments to upgrade their facilities to be cleaner and greener, making sure those jobs, those products are safe and are not threatened by dirty steel from elsewhere. So you heard him there emphasizing how he's going to stick to that, potentially bring in kind of more barriers for foreign steel, which is certainly something the steel industry has been asking for a long time. So a very kind of strategic twist on some platform points that had been out there in other forums. But this riding, put it on your list for Monday night. It is going to be a hot one.
Thanks for this, Janice. That is the CBC's Janice McGregor speaking to us from Ottawa. And as we also mentioned, we know that Jagmeet Singh is going to be speaking at a campaign event that you can see there in Toronto. From what I understand, he's at the venue now, but we are waiting for him to come up to the podium. We know we are also going to be hearing from Pierre Poilievre later on at about 11 o'clock, and so we'll take our viewers to that as well. Toronto, of course, an important place for the NDP. We know there are many ridings within Ontario, the GTA especially important to this election when it comes to picking up support. The NDP specifically, we know in this election has lost a lot of support nationally, looking really to continue its official party status once voters head to the polls on Monday. Let's listen in to Jagmeet Singh.
Thank you, thank you. Y'all are amazing. Thank you so much. What an honor to be here. Wow, that's we're gonna bring you on tour with us. It is an incredible honor to be here. First and foremost, just a big shout out to all the OPSU members. Thank you for fighting for, yeah. Appreciate you all so much. I hope you have an awesome conference, and thank you for taking the time to be here today. We're talking about what we're up against in this election. And the first thing that's the first business of order when we get back to Parliament is going to be the first budget. And this budget is going to be the budget that we use to fight back against Donald Trump. And let's make it really clear. We are never going to be the 51st state. Not now, not ever. Elbows up. And how we do that is the way we take care of each other. Because New Democrats believe, we believe fundamentally, and I know you all believe this as well, we are better off when we take care of each other. We are stronger when we look out for one another. We are better off and stronger when we lift each other up. That's what makes us Canadian. And so the next budget is going to set out those priorities so we can actually look out for one another and take care of each other. Now, here's the concern, though. We know that the priorities of the other parties aren't the right priorities for Canadians. We know that Pierre Poilievre, right, he wants to cut the things that Canadians need. He's made it really clear. He wants to cut healthcare, cut investments in the things that you need like childcare, dental care, pharmacare. He's going to cut the things you need, and it's going to make life even more expensive. But the good news is Canadians are rejecting conservatives. And now Canadians are taking a hard look at Mark Carney and saying, well, wait a second here. Wait a second. This is a guy that profited off of the housing crisis as the chair of Brookfield Investments. This is a guy who was the chair of a company that was the biggest tax dodger in our country. And now his plan includes $28 billion in cuts. That's massive. And he said just on Monday, he's going to exceed those cuts. That means massive cuts to the things we need. And while he didn't lay out where those cuts are going to be in his platform, he has told us again and again where those cuts are going to be. He has said that's going to be cuts in the operating budget. And he's defined the operating budget. He said that includes transfers to provinces, transfers to people, and transfers to healthcare. We can't afford cuts to healthcare. We need to invest in healthcare, make it stronger, make sure people have it when they need it, not cut it. Right? So in this next budget, we want to lay out our priorities. And here are the things that we're going to fight for in the next budget. We're going to fight to defend our healthcare system. We want to see no cuts to healthcare in this next budget. We're going to fight back. Healthcare is a part of what makes Canada, Canada. It's something that we're so proud of, that we have a healthcare system that's there for you when you need it, but it needs investments. And so what our plan is, we need to hire more frontline healthcare workers. We want to see commitments. In this budget, in the first budget, we want to see commitments to help us get to a point where every Canadian has access to a family doctor. And we want to see an expansion of our pharmacare to include all essential medications in year one. We know people are up against a serious cost of living, and we got to make sure in the first budget that we are tackling that by making life more affordable. So we're going to fight in the first budget to have a cap on grocery prices, on the essentials that you need. We want a cap on those prices. This cap on groceries would immediately bring down food prices. France has done it, Greece has done it, and they've both seen amazing success. In France, they brought down food inflation by 15%. 15%. And in Greece, the same cap on food essentials brought down food prices by 15%. So we can get this done. We can do it here. We also want to put in place a national rent control to help people afford their homes. That's right. That's right. We need to make sure that life's affordable, and to tackle the uncertainty of the chaos being created by Donald Trump, we need to make sure that people can actually afford their homes and afford their groceries, and these are some concrete steps we want to see happen in the budget. And then to pay for it all. You know, Canadians are worried about how we pay for this, rightly so. Our plan to pay for that is to finally make the super rich finally pay their fair share. Right? Now, to make them pay their fair share, here's a couple things we're going to do. We're going to make sure we close the loopholes. Right now, a bunch of big companies are using loopholes and not paying their fair share. They're using offshore tax havens. We're going to close those down and make sure that if you make profit in this country, you got to pay your taxes in this country. And while the Liberals have laid out one of the biggest expenses, their biggest expenditures in their platform, they're spending $19 billion in their platform to give a tax cut that mostly helps out millionaires. Does that make any sense? That makes no sense. So we're going to shut that down and say, no, we're going to ask millionaires to pay their fair share as well. So these are some of the priorities that we're going to fight for in the first budget. The first budget's got to be one that helps us fight back against the threats of Donald Trump and the uncertainty. And this is a clear way to do this. I want to remind folks of the power that people have. If you think about the things that make us Canadian, right? When people say, no, I don't want to be the 51st state, I'm proud of this country. The first thing people think about is our universal health care. And they think about how bad things are in the States. And we don't want to be like that, where if you get sick, you end up maybe going bankrupt. The major cause for bankruptcy in the States is medical costs, right? In Canada, we worry about maybe about a parking ticket at the hospital, which we got to lower the cost of parking at a hospital for sure. But we know that we can get the care that we need. And if you think about it, every single thing that we're proud of as Canadians, the things that
we
make us
have been
Canadians,
listening in to NDP Leader Jagmeet Singh as he's speaking in Toronto. We know that this is the final stretch of campaigning ahead of polls opening on Monday, April 28th. We will continue to have election coverage as the day continues. But right now, we do want to bring you some breaking news from a London, Ontario court where the sexual assault trial of 5 former World Junior hockey players was set to continue this morning. But a mistrial has been declared. The CBC's Katie Nicholson is outside the courthouse with the latest. What happened, Katie?
Well, we can tell you that mistrial was just declared. What happened was, you'll remember that we've sort of not been able to report on a lot of material that's been happening, proceedings. This trial started on Wednesday once the jury was selected, and there was a matter that arose over that lunch break, which essentially paused the proceedings. What happened was that the defense teams put forward a submission, essentially asking for a mistrial to be declared, and yesterday afternoon,